Pharaoh said, all right, you can go. The sea parted, and the Israelites escaped to freedom. This story of freedom, the Exodus from Egypt, has been recounted in many generations and adapted by various cultures. The idea that we talk about in the prophets of the Israelites being taken from bondage on eagle's wings by God, this idea of us flying to freedom, has been reinterpreted throughout generations, especially in the African American culture with slavery. I'm honored and privileged to welcome up this evening Jos Duncan, who will be reinterpreting a traditional tale called The People Could Fly by Virginia Hamilton. Ladies and gentlemen, Jos Duncan.
So in the African American tradition, we don't just tell stories, we share them. So when I say I go, can you say I may? I go?
I may.
I go?
I may.
All right, so I might need your help throughout the story. There was a time, long ago, in parts of West Africa, where the people could fly. They would soar up in the sky and just hang out up there singing this sweet song. Kakua, kakua, ooh-ah-wah, ooh-ah-wah. Can you try that? Yes. And they would just hang out up there picking sweet berries from the trees, and they would soar around the skies as they pleased, and everything was in its place until some invaders came with a plan to steal the resources from the land, and in time they grew very greedy and they even stole the people. Chained them up one by one and two by two, most of the flying Africans forgot what they could do. The oppressors stripped them of their freedom and their names, and in this land of the free and home of the brave, the African people were made to be slaves. And the oppressors called themselves masters and overseers, and they made sure that the African people worked to make the money out on the fields. Well, during this time, there was one young girl named Lucretia. What was her name?
Lucretia.
Yes. And Lucretia was a wise young girl, and she had been sold away from her mother. So she was being raised on another plantation by the elders. And then the elders wished to teach her lessons. They told her stories all the time, but some of the elders were very sad. They were very angry, and they wanted to give up, and they would tell her stories about the fight being over and not being able to go on anymore, and they would sing these songs like, soon I will be done. Trouble of the world, trouble of the world, trouble of the world. Soon I will be done. Going home to live with God. Well, when Lucretia heard those stories, she wanted to give up. She wondered if her people would ever be free, if there would ever be justice. She did not know. But then there were those elders who would come in and they would say, no, girl, we've got to be angry. We've got to fight. And they would sing songs to her like, oh, freedom. Oh, freedom. Oh, freedom. little Lucretia heard those stories, she wanted to fight. But that wasn't a good thing because the oppressors, they had these whips and they would keep her down, and that wasn't the way she wanted to go. So then she took to the elders who would tell her stories about home. They would tell her stories about the richness in her own land, tell her stories about her people and how they used to fly. And on those nights, when Lucretia heard those stories, she would have these dreams, sweet dreams where she would fly. Have any of you ever dreamed you could fly? Well, she would have those dreams, and in those dreams, it was the first time she could actually feel a sense of freedom. So she would have those dreams night after night, and over weeks, she would not only feel her own freedom, but she could feel the freedom of her children, and she would just envision the freedom for her grandchildren, but she would still wake up on the field. But one day, she was very ill. She couldn't work as hard as she used to. And she was out there on the plantation giving it her best, but she just couldn't seem to get it together. Well, the oppressor came over to her and began to yell at her, and all the other enslaved Africans gathered around trying to help the young girl, but he pulled out his whip and began to whip her and whip her and whip her, and somehow as she fell to her knees, she closed her eyes and she began to think of the sweet dreams she was having. She could feel the stories of her people in her body. And she began, with the little breath she had, to call out very sweetly, Kakua, Kakua, ooh-ah-wah, ooh-ah-wah. Well, the other Africans heard her, and they began to sing along with her. Kakua, Kakua, ooh-ah-wah, ooh-ah-wah. And they could feel each other getting stronger, and they sang out louder. Kakua, Kakua, ooh-ah-wah, ooh-ah-wah. And just then Lucretia stood up and she looked that oppressor in the eye and she stepped up into the air and she flew. The other Africans kept singing, and too, they flew. They all flew to freedom. And they flew real high. They were like dark brown birds all over the deep blue sky. And they had their rhythms and their stories and their songs inside. See, the African people, they